Hey, good evening, folks. My name's Dave Englishman. Welcome to the Dave Englishman Show. Good to have you back. Sorry I haven't done a video in 11 days. I have been pulling lots of hours at work, and 60 hours a week, and I had a lot of household projects I had to try to get done, and I was behind on things because I was working too many hours, so I've taken some days and I've gotten things done around my home. As they say, happy wife, happy life. So with that being said, again, I apologize. I want to remind you again, I don't do these videos for me, I do them for you. I spend the time to do the research. I will admit the last week and a half, I put off some things because I was doing stuff around my home, but the stuff that I put together I think you'll find interesting. Some of it you may have seen on mainstream media, not in its entirety, and other things you wouldn't have seen in the mainstream media. So at the beginning of every show, and sometimes at the end, I talk about the Convention of States. I believe if you're fed up, as I am, you should contact these people here, sign the petition for the Convention of States, and I'll show you who some of these people are. It says here, why call a Convention of States? Simple, to bring power back to the states and the people where it belongs. Unelected bureaucrats in Washington, D.C. shouldn't be allowed to make sweeping decisions that impact millions of Americans. It says, what's Convention of States? Article 4 of the U.S. Constitution gives the states the power to call a Convention of States to propose amendments. It takes 34 states to call the convention and 38 to ratify, and any amendments that are proposed. Our convention would only allow the states to discuss amendments that limit the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, impose fiscal restraints, and place term limits on federal officials. So it talks here, you can click on the progress map that's located in this. I'm going to put this link in the show notes in my show. If you click the down button below my video, everything that I am talking about tonight, I have links that take you to articles or videos that you can do some more research. This is one of them, so you can do some exploration on the Convention of States. I urge you to sign the petition. I urge you to call your congressmen and your senators. I urge you to get on your state legislature and get on your local rep. Send emails as often as you can. You should be emailing your senators, your congressmen, and at least your state rep at least once a week with your grievances, whether it's a repetitious email or not. You need to keep hounding them and be on their backs. Doesn't matter if they're Democrats or conservative Republicans, doesn't matter. Even if they're Democrats and they really don't listen to you, if there's enough of you that keep sending emails, maybe, just maybe, they'll either open their eyes and start to turn things towards the favor of the people for fear of losing their seat, as they always do. But if that doesn't happen, I hope that enough people watch enough things like mine that give facts and data that people make informed decisions and they vote all Democrats out of state power, federal power. Just get them out. Clean out the swamp in DC starts homegrown. So this is a grassroots movement for the Convention of States, and it says who's behind this thing, and it shows national leadership, state leadership. It says take action. So let's go to some of the names. You've got Lieutenant Colonel Allen West, Mark Levin, Ben Shapiro, Charlie Kirk, Senator Rand Paul, James O'Keefe, Governor Ron DeSantis, Lawrence Jones, Governor Greg Abbott, Sean Hannity, Eric Metaxas, Senator Ben Sasse, Ben Carson, Lawrence Reed, Sarah Palin, James Dobson, Marco Rubio, Tom Coburn, Pete Hegsworth, Mike Huckabee, Senator Sam DeMint, Jeff Duncan, Steve Hilton, Bobby Jindal, Dave Barton, Pete Coors, Congressman William Timmons, Steve Ducey, Lieutenant Colonel Bill Cowan, and Representative Ralph Norman, Jeb Bush, believe it or not, Michael Ferris, Jim Talent, David Horowitz, Louis Gohmert, Professor Rob Nettleson, Texas Public Policy Center, Morton Blackwell. The list keeps going, but you should really go to this site. You should sign up for the petition. You should do some reading on it. And again, petition your senators and your congressmen and petition your state to join the Convention of States and get this thing done. We need term limits if we're going to ever end the deep state swamp. So let's get right into this. Don't know if you heard today, but General Michael Flynn is basically vindicated. And I'm going to just read you a little bit of this, and then I want to talk a little bit about Flynn, and we're going to look at another little piece of evidence here that's going to give us some insight into who is really behind this. So it says here, Attorney General William Barr asked the court in May to allow it to have the case dismissed. U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan, which I've talked about before, declined to immediately dismiss the case, seeking instead to evaluate on his own the department's unusual dismissal request, but he was actually going against precedent. He appointed retired federal judge John Gleeson to argue against the department's position and to consider whether Flynn could be held in criminal contempt for perjury. Flynn was the only White House official charged in the Mueller investigation. The Justice Department moved to dismiss the case as part of the broader effort by Barr to scrutinize and even undo some of the decisions reached during the Russia investigation, which has now been proven a complete hoax. For those Democrats out there that watch this, and I'm not talking center mainstream Democrats who have a brain, I'm talking the left-wing Looney Tunes, the Marxists, the socialists, and even the Looney Tunes who think Biden would make a great president. If you're watching, leave my show. I don't even want you here. I want people who want to receive and digest facts and data and process it and do the right thing with it. You crazies on the far left, you just criticize, you riot, you have to label people with your identity politics slanders because you don't agree with them. So just leave my show, don't make any comments, and we'll move on. So it says here, in its motion, the department argued that the Flynn calls with the Russian ambassador, in which they discussed sanctions the Obama administration imposed on Russia for election interference, were appropriate and not material to the underlying counterintelligence investigation. It goes on to say the department also noted that weeks before the interview, the FBI had prepared to close its investigation into Flynn after not finding evidence of a crime. However, Gleeson called the Justice Department request a gross abuse of prosecutorial power and accused the government of creating a pretext to benefit an ally of the president. Well, when it went before the three-panel justice system to get this case dismissed, I want to show you what came up as a piece of evidence. And this should shake everyone to their core. So these are notes that were compiled from the case that were based upon the Peter Strzok notes taken from the meeting in the White House. Strzok's notes, believed to be of January 4th, 2017, reveal, so Trump has won the election but hasn't been inaugurated yet. So Strzok's notes, believed to be of January 4th, 2017, reveal that former President Obama, James Comey, Sally Yates, Joe Biden, and apparently Susan Rice discussed the transcripts of Flynn's calls and how to proceed against him. Let me read you the last couple of words here. They discussed the transcripts of Flynn's calls and how to proceed against him. You got that? Mr. Obama himself directed that, quote, the right people, investigate General Flynn. That statement caused former FBI Director Comey to acknowledge the obvious, that General Flynn's phone calls with Ambassador Kislyak appear legitimate. According to Strzok's notes, it appears that Vice President Biden personally raised the idea of the Logan Act to be used against General Flynn. That became an admitted pretext to investigate General Flynn, and the notes are attached as Exhibit 1. And there's more. So you have to understand that it came from the highest powers in the land. The President of the United States abused his power and his authority and used the FBI's intel to open up a fraudulent case that they manufactured against General Flynn. They bankrupted him. They threatened to put his son in jail, who had just had a baby. And they never brought up in their interview in the White House with him about the sanctions. But then they tried to get him on the sanctions. So it was a scam from the very beginning. And Susan Rice's email on the day of the inauguration, just minutes before Trump took the oath of office, and Susan Rice says that Obama wants it done by the book, to the letter of the law. They manufactured a crime against him, and then they were going to use the legal justice system in our country to prosecute him after they framed him. Think of that for a minute, folks. The President of the United States. So Nixon had tapes on breaking into the Watergate Hotel to get information on the Democrat campaign. But nobody went to jail, nobody's life was ruined. Countless people's lives have been turned upside down and ruined over the fake Russia investigation. Then we went through the fake impeachment, and it goes on and on and on. Do you understand that we are in 4 years of continuous chaos, with 2020 being the culmination of it all, and it's only going to get worse right through to November? Trust me, folks, it's going to get much, much worse. They are going to do anything they can to get rid of Trump, because he's draining the swamp and he's outing them all for who they really are. So before I get into this video, I wanted to share something with you. So I go to the office this morning. I go into the lounge to get myself a coffee, and I run into this really nice gentleman, and we start having a conversation. And the conversation then started to gravitate towards politics, the coronavirus, the riots, why the rioting is happening, Antifa, Black Lives Matter movement. We kind of went all over the whole spectrum. And I want to share something with you that kind of struck me. This young gentleman, probably in his mid-30s, very well-educated black fellow, told me that he has his MBA and his PhD, came from the ghetto, worked his way up, went to college, and now has a really good job and a good placement. And he said to me that he's sick and tired of watching the black youth get sucked into these movements, which are no longer run by blacks. They're run by, I called them white, and he said they're brown, meaning they're mixed. But if you look at Antifa and Black Lives Matter, it's probably 60% predominantly white kids. Some are high school age, some are college, some are in their mid-20s. But these are anarchists. They're Marxists that have been brainwashed in our universities and our public schools with things like the 1619 history agenda, where they've completely warped American history, which is why these kids hate the United States. They look at the United States as the warmonger of the world, that we have systematically raped and pillaged other civilizations and other countries for their wealth to enrich us, which is just not true. You look at how the United States has been ripped off over the last 50 years with supporting troops all over the world, protecting everybody, and meanwhile nobody else has been paying. Trump's been the first one to get everybody to pay. So you look at things like that, and the history has been completely warped. And this is why these kids don't even know who Ulysses S. Grant is. They're trying to rip down the statue of Grant, Teddy Roosevelt. They ripped down the statue of George Washington, and they burned a U.S. flag on him. These kids do not revere the United States. They're professors who are indoctrinated Marxists, socialists, and communists themselves, are in on the whole agenda to get rid of the United States. The city mayors that are Democrat, and Democrat states that are controlled by Democrat governors, are obviously in on it because they're doing nothing about what's going on in their city centers. They haven't cracked down. They've let this chaos persist. The only one who's been true to his word has been Trump. So this gentleman says to me, the biggest problem in the black community is the fact that they're fatherless. And I've talked about that on countless shows that I've done. I haven't done many, but probably 4 or 5 of my shows out of the 12 or 13 that I've done, I've talked about that very topic. And he said the other issue that's been going on, which has kind of cleared itself up under the Trump administration right up to the coronavirus, was the fact that there were no jobs in the inner cities. And that Trump has worked his butt off to help revitalize employment in the inner cities and get young black men back to work, to help them uplift themselves and maybe have something to aspire to. And so there's less crime on the street as far as major crime. Well, he then got into the fact that the downtown, real bad core of the city, the ghettos, if you want to call them that the black on black crime is going through the roof, and that the police, because of BLM and Antifa, but even BLM over the past couple of years, that the police are basically not hands off, but they don't want to go into these communities because the police feel threatened, but they go anyway because that's their job. So we're going to get into some of this stuff about the policing and how it affects these communities. But I wanted to share with you a 4-minute video of a young black gentleman who sums up basically the crux of the conversation that I had with the young gentleman this morning, who articulated to me that these kids walking around with their pants halfway down to their knees and using the N-word to call themselves that it's degrading against themselves. It shows no integrity, self-loathing. And he said that it's the issue of the leaderless black communities. He said they have leaders in the black community, but the problem is they're Democrat leaders in the black community. They're guys like Al Sharpton. And he said that the biggest problem is that they don't have common sense leadership in these communities to help get kids to realize that the drugs and the gangs and the guns and the killing is not the way to go. He said they need more leaders that are going to bring positivity to their communities and to bring an uplifting message of hope, not a message of racial divide and social division. So I want you to listen to what this young man has to say about Black Lives Matter, and I think you'll find this extremely interesting.
Did you ever wonder why is it that the entire system seems to be in favor of Black Lives Matter and the protests that have been taking the nation by storm? Well, if you're wondering why, that's a pretty good question. Not only do all the mega corporations support it, not only do most government officials, so do some very shady characters. Now, I'm sure you've seen a lot of the Antifa members directing people what to do, and that might have a lot to do with what is the overall agenda of these protests. Members of the Minneapolis City Council, a Democrat-ran city, might I add, are now vowing to dismantle the police. They want to defund, dismantle, and disband the police in their city. Now, what do you think would happen if they were to do that? Do you think that it would save lives? Because there hasn't been too many deaths involving police officers and black men. But you know what there has been? There's been plenty of black on black crime. 94% of black men are killed by other black men. So do you think that number is going to get higher or lower if you disbanded the police? Now, like I said, I'm no mathematician, but I think it's pretty obvious. Do you think it'll save lives Or do you think lives will be lost? It is 18 and a half times more likely for a police officer to be shot by a black male than it is for a black male to be shot by a police officer. What does that tell you? It tells you that the Black Lives Matter movement is based on a lie. A lie that black men are being systematically and racially targeted because of who they are. And that is simply not true. The numbers show us, when you look at the whole picture, black men commit more crime, therefore have more run-ins with police, therefore are more likely to die in the hands of the police. It's really that simple. And yes, I will end this video by saying that all lives matter. Liberals say that saying all lives matter is racist because all lives aren't being taken or at risk right now. And that is simply the furthest thing from the truth. All lives are taken every single day by violence from all kinds of people. All lives should be addressed. All lives should be cared about. And all lives do matter. Thank you, everyone. If you liked this.
So this gentleman started off that video by saying he's black, his mom's black, his dad's black, his grandparents are black. He loves himself and he loves his community and he loves his people. He calls them his kind, but he loves all men. And he doesn't believe that there's a racial divide in the United States. And he goes on to give the police killing statistics of both black and white, which I gave 2 shows ago. And he does the comparison. In 2017, there was literally 150 more white males that were killed at the hands of the police than there were blacks. And in the same year, I think there was 23 more Spanish that were killed than blacks in 2017. And even though the murders have been diminishing or the killings have been diminishing over the years, the numbers are still comparatively the same. The number of blacks that are killed are less than the number of whites. And you may say, oh yeah, but there's less black people in the United States population. Yes, there is. Black men make up 6% of the United States population, whereas black men make up 6% of the population, and white men make up 60%, with the rest being Asian, Indian, Spanish, what have you. So 50% of the crime, that violent crime that happens in the United States, is done by 6% of the population. And therefore, that's why the numbers look skewed by population data. But when you look at the amount of crime that's committed by that particular segment of our country, the numbers are astounding. 50% of the violent crime is committed by 6% of the population. And yet we still have, 200 and some killings in 2017 of black men at the hands of police. But then again, you had another 150 more whites. So the other 50% of the violent crime is committed by all other races other than black. So even though the numbers look bad on one hand, they're really not when you look at the actual crime rate. So I think that now that Trump has 41% of the black vote, I think that is one of the reasons why the Democrats are just going through the roof, and now the alarm bells are going and they're trying to pull out all the stops to get rid of Trump. It doesn't matter to them whether they lie bold-faced on the news. Our news media is just a joke anymore. I mean, they can't even report today properly that General Flynn is vindicated. I mean, they're still lying about it. They're still making up stories. It's just, first of all, it's unethical. But the news media, they're not ethical anymore. See, the news media is supposed to tell the truth. And they're supposed to be the public's view of what's really going on, so we can make an informed decision about where our politics go. Because the government is of the people, for the people, by the people. So if you're not getting correct news, therefore your views are skewed, you're going to make decisions based upon what you're being told. And the news media is just lying bold-faced, and most of the left-leaning people who are watching CNN, MSNBC, NBC, ABC, the whole 9 yards, NPR News. I mean, NPR News is public funded. And so we've been funding them all along. Even the people on the right, like myself, have been funding them to lie to the American public about everything. Really? Kind of warped if you ask me. So I want to show you something. This is the original founder of Black Lives Matter. And she admits that they're trained Marxists. Who trained them?
I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories, and I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk. I also think that it might, I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. We are trained Marxists.
So I want to know, if they're trained Marxists, who's providing the training, who's paying for it? Now that they're taking in money by donations for the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's already been proven that it goes to a website called Act Blue, and Act Blue funnels the money directly to the Democrat National Committee. So they had a party that was bankrupt, right? Just think about this for a minute. Follow me. So we go from a fake impeachment, which started in the fall, in November. Don't forget now, they're saying that the Wuhan virus, the China flu, started in November. Now there's reports saying that it actually started in September, that they're even 60 days further behind on notifying us than we originally thought. But let's use November. So coronavirus November, impeachment starts November. In January, the impeachment's still going on. The end of January, Trump puts the travel ban in place. They crucify him for it, right? We go from that to the pandemic, full-blown pandemic, where states are shut down. Some states still are shut down, 8 of them. The one I live in still, and the one I work in still. And we go to the full-blown pandemic, and then we go from a pandemic where you're supposed to now wear a mask and social distance and everything else. We go from that to the George Floyd killing, which 99% of the population, which we spoke about that this morning too in the lounge, 99% of the population, black, white, Chinese, Asian, American, Indian, doesn't matter, 99% of the population all agree that what happened to George Floyd was unethical, it was outright murder, it was despicable, he was a dirty cop, he was a rotten bad apple. You get those every once in a while in policing, as a doctor, as a lawyer, doesn't matter what profession, what trade, or what industry you're in, you're always going to find a bad apple. You're going to find somebody who is a racist. You're going to find somebody who just has a vendetta against, for whatever reason. It doesn't mean we have systemic racism in the country, right? In my discussion this morning, I said to this gentleman, I said, I'm 55 years of age. I remember as a very young child hearing people occasionally use the N-word, and I look at it and I go, okay, well, culturally the United States was a lot different than it is now, but from what I remember, hearing that word, it wasn't in a derogatory sense of to call people out. And I heard that word less than I can count all my fingers on one hand. And as I got older and older and older, I never heard that word again, but I hear it all the time from blacks calling other blacks that. And it bothers the hell out of me that they can have so much hypocrisy. And I don't know if it's they're indoctrinated to believe in that the same way that these schools are indoctrinating kids that go to colleges and universities become socialist Marxists. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't do anybody any good. It'd be like white people calling themselves all the time a honky. I mean, you don't do that because it would be degrading, right? And this happens prevalent in the black community amongst these young kids. And the gentleman I spoke to this morning said, you know, I'm educated and I believe I've got some culture, and, you know, I uplifted myself. And when I see these kids and I hear them speak like that, he said, you know, I'm a man of law and order. And he said, I just want to go up and smack them upside the head and knock them out. And then when they wake up, say to them, you need to put some sense into your head, man. So I've been thinking all day about this conversation with this gentleman, and I was like, I wanted to tell people about this because this conversation that we had this morning needs to happen on a national level. We need to have a conversation where people have open dialogue about the grievances. And the grievances aren't one race or culture against the other. The grievance, I think, is mutual. But the problem is that one side doesn't have all the facts to make an informed decision because the left has controlled the narrative in cities and states, sometimes for decades, up to a half a century. I think the conversation has to be had, but the conversation has to be had in a gentle way of informing. If we already have 41% of the black vote, we only have 60% of the black community to open their eyes, to get them to open their eyes. No, we're not going to get everybody to open their eyes, but if we got 80% of the black community to open their eyes, the Democrat Party would never exist again within my lifetime, your lifetime. That's what needs to happen. We need to educate the black community how money has flowed to their communities and gone into the coffers and the pockets of the people who have been in power to promote this agenda of socialism. They've been working a slow, steady march towards socialism for 60 years. Since JFK was assassinated, they've been working toward, they were working before that, but once JFK was out of the way, they had a clear path to get to where they wanted to go. And they were interrupted only a couple of times, if you look through history. So there was Nixon, and Gerald Ford finished out his term. We had Ronald Reagan. We had George Bush Sr. and George Bush Jr. We've had five Republican presidents, and one was impeached and actually resigned. But 5 in 60 years. 5 in 60 years. And not all of them did 2 terms. So when you look at what's happened over the last 60 years, a lot of what's happened has been done through Congress. A lot of it has been done through the judicial branch, because they've infected the judicial branch as well. So I want to get a little deeper into this. Can you imagine a world where there was no police and it was lawless? Can you imagine a world like this poor guy here? He's a preacher, and he was assaulted by the members of Chazistan in Seattle. There's no other word for them. So he went in to preach the gospel. He's an actual reverend. He goes in to preach, and they physically attack him. They haul him to the ground, and they start stealing his belongings. And he brought along a mobile speaker that he could talk through a microphone to get people to listen to him. They're trying to steal his speaker. He doesn't want to give it up. They finally take it from him, and then they do like a perp walk through the downtown city center to kick him out of the Chaz section of Seattle. But they start beating the hell out of him. This is Antifa and Black Lives. This is unbelievable. This is what's going on, and they say that it's peaceful there. The mayor says that it's the summer of love. There was another video that I saw today that I can't find now. It's been removed off of YouTube, in which I believe it's an NBC reporter is in Chaz talking to the Chazistan's residents, and they're saying, oh yeah, it seems pretty peaceful here. They're growing gardens. It's like an outdoor party. They're gardening. They have barbecues going. And all of a sudden the gunshots ring out. And then the video ends. And you're like, okay. They posted this on the national news, right? You can hear the gunshots go off because it was live. And then the video gets cut off. So they're trying to promote after they've already played the gunshots. Now it was live, so you know they cut it off. It didn't play again. It got recorded, and somebody uploaded it onto YouTube, and it disappeared after a while. Probably find it again tomorrow. You should go look for it, and if I can find it again, I'll post it in the show notes. But there's gunfire going off in the background, and then yet they cut to the anchor, and the anchor's like, "Yeah, it's peaceful. It's great in that downtown portion of the city. They provide their own justice, and it's kind of like a love fest." So it's unbelievable what the news media is doing, because they're lying to you straight out every single day, 24/7. Don't know if you saw this whole interview. I'm only going to play a minute of it. She posted her own video. This is a woman who moved to the United States. She's from Venezuela, and she's going to tell you things that you need to hear as a U.S. citizen.
Why do I even worry about some silly little statues coming down or some silly little street names changing? Why do I care? It's because the last time I didn't care about this, I was a teenager. I have already lived through this thing when I was living in Venezuela. The statues came down. Chavez didn't want that history displayed. And then he changed the street names. Then came the
I apologize.
curriculum. Then some movies couldn't be shown on certain TV channels, and so on and so forth. You guys think it can't happen to you? I've heard this so many times. But always be on guard. Never believe something can't happen to you. You need to guard your country and your society, or it will be destroyed. We didn't believe it could happen to us. Us Venezuelans, Cubans warned us. And we're like, Venezuela, we know what freedom is like. That's not going to happen here. Yet it happened. And there's clearly a lot of people wanting to destroy the U.S.
So I don't know if you caught the very beginning. She's talking about the statues coming down, the history being erased, and then socialism took over. So we're going to tie all of this together at the very end. But I wanted to bring you to this. So we already know that they want to get rid of the police departments across the country. The left is pushing for that. You already have some city councils like Minneapolis who are voting to disband the police and defund them. So under the beautiful Mayor de Blasio in New York City, the NYPD disbanded the entire anti-crime unit. Now, I don't know if you know what the anti-crime unit does. These are plainclothes officers who are trained for street duty. They're not like a regular beat cop. So, for example, if two gentlemen of any color, creed, background are standing on a corner, or they go in behind a building and they're selling an illegal gun, well, the plainclothes cops, some of them might be dressed as vagrants, some of them might be dressed as business people, they're plainclothes police officers, and they investigate in real life time street crime. And they're the ones who are getting most of the guns off the street. They're the ones getting most of the drugs off the street. They're the ones who are getting most of the johns and the prostitutes off the streets. They disbanded them. And they're going to take these 600 police officers who have been undercover, stopping most of the major crime in New York City, and now they're going to make them regular beat cops. So they're going to be uniformed police officers on the street. More. And they're saying that that's going to be a contribution to proper policing. So you tell me, if you see a police officer in a uniform, are you going to pull out an illegal gun and try to sell it to somebody else? Or are you going to keep that concealed where you can get out of the way and get a place that you're unseen, right? So all they've done is they've now put a target on all the police back, saying, oh, here's a cop, right? There's a cop. Don't do anything in front of that person. He's a cop. So now they're not going to be able to catch the guns, the drugs, even in some cases the child trafficking that goes on. I mean, we're talking about a lot of different things that these people did on the streets of New York, which slowed, stopped, and prevented crime. And de Blasio and the chief of police have now taken that away. So I want to show you what happens when there are no police, because this is where we're headed, folks. We're headed for anarchy with Marxists at the helm. This is a video from Northeast Washington, D.C. This is taken last weekend, and I haven't seen it anywhere on the news media. I only found this on the web last weekend, and it blew my mind. and the police car comes up on the street. That was a real life gunfight on a street in Washington, D.C. This is what happens, and it'll get much worse. Much, much worse. So you have anarchists smashing and burning and looting cities, and you have kids that hate the country. They've been infected, their minds have been infected with this socialist and Marxist ideology, and they're trying to destroy the country, and they have the backing of blue state governors, and they have the backing of liberal mayors, they have the backing of the likes of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. Because of Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer and all the rest of the band of idiots within the DNC, nobody's spoken out against the violence and the crime. If anything, they've condoned it, and they've actually asked for more of it. We live in crazy times, folks. So now I want to get to, we started out with Obama. We've gone through what's going on in our country over the past 6 months, and we're going to go back to Obama. So this is put together by the Beltway, and they did an investigation, and they compiled a lot of information, and they are now under the belief by evidence that Obama's been running a shadow government in the background, spying on people, using past spying in which they've blackmailed people on the left and on the right to do their bidding in this ongoing war against Trump and in eventuality, the American people. So it says here, are black files being used in 2020? It says, once you realize that the Obama administration's illegal surveillance didn't start with Donald Trump, but actually seems to have begun years before during Obama's first term with the weaponization of the IRS, you begin to understand the nefarious nature of our Manchurian president. FISA Judge Rosemary Collier acknowledged in her report that there were tons of unauthorized search queries, and there was no reason to believe the 85% non-compliant rate was any different from the abuse of the NSA database going back to 2012. Says Donald Trump didn't come down that escalator until mid-year 2015. All that concentrated surveillance was done with a purpose. Was it to compile black files on both political enemies as well as allies to guarantee political outcomes? Why did Paul Ryan, who rose to power as a deficit hawk, become a prolific spender and then retire at the peak of power while still a very young man? Following the passage of the 2015 omnibus, the Senate Minority Leader gushed after then Speaker of the House Ryan delivered the support required to pass the massive spending bill. If you would have told me this year that I'd be standing here celebrating the passage of this omnibus bill, Schumer claimed, I wouldn't have believed it, but here we are. And we got more than we asked for. Another question, why did Chief Justice John Roberts break with his conservative roots and rewrite Obamacare? From there, it seems like Roberts never looked back. Why do politicians of both parties promise voters they'll adhere to moderate or conservative policies only to make a 180-degree turnaround when it's time to legislate? Why are American corporate leaders repping more for China than for America? Why have Google, Facebook, and Twitter and all their subsidiaries and alliances willingly opened themselves to antitrust violations through the manipulation and control of financial benefit in order to achieve ideological censorship? Why are we $25 trillion in debt? This article goes on, and then it starts into the shadow government with trillions of dollars and world domination at stake. Do you think an election would stop us? So Obama had an agenda for this country. Hillary was supposed to finish it. She never won the election. They've done everything within their power since the day Trump took office to rid him out of the White House. And they've done nothing for the American people. Think about that. They have done absolutely nothing positive in 3.5 years for the American people. The Democrats and their Democrat servants in all the spy agencies, the top brass, including Wray, he should be gone. He should have been gone this morning. With the release of that information on General Flynn, Wray should have been gone this morning. Flynn should be appointed in his job. Well, that would be awesome. But anyway, when you get down to the crux of the matter, Obama has an agenda that he's still trying to enact today. And he's using BLM and Antifa, he's using the name of George Floyd to be able to push this agenda through. And you heard the first gentleman in the first video I played where he said it's being pushed by some really nefarious people. He's talking about Obama and he's talking about George Soros. He's talking about the Clinton Foundation. He's talking about people in Hollywood that fund this movement. Understand, folks, Antifa and BLM was hijacked. That I proved to you a couple of videos ago with one of the former leaders of BLM who got out because he said it's been infected by Marxists and socialists. And then this woman admits that she's a trained Marxist. So Barack Obama is basically using, and his associates, his cronies, the one who are paying for this, they're basically using Antifa and Black Lives Matter as Hitler used the brown shirts, as Mussolini used the black shirts. They would beat their political opponents to a pulp or kill them or make them just disappear. And eventually, if we keep letting what's been happening go on and we allow Democrat governors and mayors to defund police departments and go with lawlessness on our streets, where people in Seattle are businesses, they're packing up and they're moving out of state. They're shuttering their doors and they're just moving. And they're telling their employees, if you want to follow me, come on with me. I'll make sure you get paid properly. It's a beautiful place to go, blah, 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 blah. And they're just moving out. They don't want any more of this. On Fifth Avenue, there's already 3 stores that gave their notice they're moving out of their buildings because they said that, number one, there's no security, and number two, it's not an iconic center anymore because nobody wants to go there. So real estate values are going down. So do you understand that Obama and these other socialists, they don't care about businesses because at the end of the day, it's all about big government and government control of big business. It's government control of everything you do in your life, right? So to them, they don't care if business folds. They don't care if a business goes out of business or they have to move or whatever. They didn't care about that during the pandemic. They didn't care about it during the riots. Are you starting to get the point here? Are you starting to see what's really going on? They don't care about business. They don't care about American people making money. They don't care about the American dream. They don't care about individuals. They don't care about individualism. They don't care about property rights. They don't care about anything that you care about. They only care about one thing, power. And the second thing they care about, control. Power and control. And they use these thugs from Antifa and the BLM to beat people who don't subscribe to the same ideology. That's where we're at today. That's exactly where we're at. And Obama and Hillary and a lot of others that sit in predominant places of power within our Senate, within our Congress, and even in our state houses, our governorships and our mayorships are in control of what's going on to some degree. And that's why this threat against America exists. Can you imagine? We've already had so many cities that have been under siege that they're trying to set up these autonomous zones, and we're allowing it to happen. I'm telling you, as Americans, gun sales are up. They're through the roof. It's 400%. If you don't own a gun and you don't have a carry conceal permit, you better go out and get one. And you better go and buy a gun. And you better train with it. You better learn how to handle it. You better learn how to be safe with it. And you're going to need it to protect your family if this crap goes on for much longer. I'm telling you, you're going to have to take the law into your own hands to defend and protect your property and your family and your rights and your liberty. And that's where we're headed. So on the topic of policing, because these people say that police officers are bad, blah, blah, blah. I want to share something with you on a personal level. I have in my life been friends with and still are friends with 5 different people who are police officers. And my very first police officer friend, I made friends with this gentleman when I was in my late 20s. He's a few years older than I was. I met him, I was running my own business at the time, and he came to me as a client, and I got to know him to the point where we hung out, we talked, he'd come in, I'd do work for him, and we'd chat, we'd share personal information back and forth, and he was working on a case. And I'm just sharing this with you because I want you to understand maybe a little tidbit of what it's like to be a police officer. So we're out one night, we're driving in his car, and we're talking, and he said to me, he says, I got to get something off my chest. And I said, sure. And he says to me, so I got pulled over the other day by a police officer. And I said, what? He says, I got pulled over. And he says, and the officer let me go. He said, he followed me home. I said, what are you talking about? And he said, I'm working on this case. Now, I want to digress for a second. This gentleman had 3 daughters. And the oldest one at the time, she was probably 6 or 7 years of age, and he had 2 that, I think one was 4 and the other one was like 2 at the time. And he said to me, I've been working on this case. He said, do you remember reading about the girl who was tied to a mattress and lit on fire and she burned to death? And I said, yeah, I do. And he said to me, I'm investigating that case. And he said, what they're not reporting in the news, he said, she was raped. And the girl was 8. And here's a guy who started off as a beat foot patrol officer, and in an exclusive area of the city where there's a lot of tourism, and at the same time, literally like 3 blocks off of this highly occupied tourism area, which comprised about 8 square blocks. Little bistros, restaurants, high-end shopping. A block away was a major shopping mall. The canal was there. There was lots of things to do. It was always a lot of action. So he started out there, and literally 5 blocks to the other side was welfare housing, and they had a men's hostel and a women's hostel, and they had soup kitchen lines and things like this. Well, these people would come into the tourism area and rob people, pander, and things like this. So he started out down there, and then he got into a patrol car, and he worked his way up through the system until he was now the lead homicide detective for the city. And he's telling me that he's doing this case, and it's affecting him on a deeply emotional level, and he's trying to deal with it and keep it all together, because there's a lot of facts in this case that are totally disgusting to him, and anybody who would have been exposed to those facts probably would have vomited. And he said that he started drinking more, and he was trying to go home and be, civil and be loving and caring with his wife and his kids, and he was having a difficult time keeping his own emotions together, having 3 daughters and then seeing what happened to this girl. So he bought a 6-pack one night and drank it in the parking lot in his car at the police department at the station, and then got in his car and tried to drive home. And he got pulled over, and he said to me, he said it was eye-opening, and he said, I need to straighten out what's going on in my life. And he said, I've got to finish this case, and he said, and I want off homicide. And he went on to be one of the lead officers in the city for guns and gangs, and I spoke to him about that, and he said, it on a different level, it's just as stressful and just as rotten as doing homicide work. And he said he would come home, sleepless nights, wake up with cold sweat, dreaming about the case. These sights that he had seen would come running back into his mind. And yet these people are persecuted. These are the people who are investigating crimes that could happen to any of us. These are people who are patrolling our streets. These are people who are protecting our liberties and our freedom. Whether you're black, white, brown, Asian, it doesn't matter. I'm not saying every police officer is a great human being or has a great disposition or is going to treat you fairly or treat you right. You're going to have the odd asshole. But you get the odd asshole in everything. You know it. But you also know that George Floyd was killed by an asshole. And those assholes are far and few between. For the most part, 99.9% of all police officers, just like 99.9% of the population, are decent, God-fearing, good people who care about one another and want to do right by each other because they want to have done right by them. And we're letting this band of idiots persecute them. And I'm saying band of idiots, which goes right to Congress, it goes right to the head of the DNC, it goes to Obama, it goes to all of them. They do not deserve to have your vote. They do not deserve to have power. So I want to bring you something, considering that we talked about Barack Obama and how he's running a shadow government and how the evidence is there that people have been blackmailed. And I believe this has been going on for years, and I've already proven to you that the spying was going on as far back as 2012. So let's get to our state senator back when he was a congressman, and then we're going to talk about him again when he's a senator. And I'm talking about Chris Murphy. Because like I said to you at the very beginning, the Convention of States, right, is at the grassroots level. We need to change everything from the bottom up. So you've got senators that represent us in Washington that are our state senators. And I'm going to read to you some things about Senator Murphy, because this guy has been in front of the news cameras since the election of 2016, hammering Trump about Russian collusion. Then he hammered him about the fake impeachment crap. Then he's been hammering about the pandemic. Now he's hammering about money and testing. It just goes on and on and on. This guy is a panderer. He's a liar. He's a fraud. He's a socialist. He's a Marxist. He doesn't care about you. He doesn't even live in Connecticut. He lives in Washington. He hardly ever comes back to his district. He writes all kinds of Twitter posts and Facebook posts to make you believe that he cares about everything that's going on in Connecticut, but the guy's a sleaze bucket, and I'm going to show you why. Don't vote for this man ever again. He is a jerk. So this was written in 11th of September 2012. Murphy, Connecticut Senate candidates mortgage scandal brews. The U.S. Senate campaign of Linda McMahon, a Republican from Connecticut, has filed an ethics complaint against McMahon's opponent, Congressman Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, with the Office of Congressional Ethics. The complaint charges that Murphy received preferential treatment in 2008. Remember, we had a market crash in 2008. Remember? The Great Recession, Obama, trillions, all kinds of spending, shovel-ready jobs, bridges, roads, and tunnels. Remember all of that crap? So 2008. That he received preferential treatment in 2008 from Webster Bank when the bank offered him a mortgage interest rate of 4.9% on a home equity line of credit in the amount of $43,000. That doesn't seem so bad, right? So let's go on. The interest rate was allegedly extended to Murphy by the bank following his default on his home mortgage, also through Webster Bank, and a 2005 tax lien placed upon his house for failure to pay property taxes. Murphy was also sued in a separate action for non-payment of rent for an apartment in Southington, Connecticut in December of 2003. And it goes on. Think it can't get any worse? Here goes. Chris Murphy's been a member of Congress since 2007. By 2008, the year after Murphy faced foreclosure on his home, banks were in a lot of trouble and starting to squeeze borrowers. Webster Bank was in enough trouble that it would receive $400 million in federal aid in 2009. Despite this fact, Webster Bank did lend Mr. Murphy more money in 2008 for his home equity line of credit. In addition, Murphy received contributions from Webster Bank's Political Action Committee at various times through 2008. In a recent statement, Webster Bank denied giving preferential treatment to Congressman Murphy. The bank states that its PAC donated a total of $2,100 to Murphy's congressional campaign between 2008 and 10, and has not donated to his campaign since that time. Nevertheless, the situation is eerily reminiscent of the scandal associated with another Connecticut politician, former Connecticut Senator Chris Dodd, who retired in 2010 and who had been accused by the current House Committee on Oversight of receiving special treatment by some prime mortgage lender, Countrywide Financial, in an attempt to influence policy changes in Congress. So you're starting to understand when I say these people have been bought off and they've been paid and they get favors. At the same time, some of these favors come with a price because I believe these people are blackmailed. And once they're blackmailed, they'll do anything. Look at Adam Schiff. You get on the House floor and outright rampantly lie to the American public on national television, and not one heartbeat is missed, not one tear shed in remorse. These people are the scum of the earth. They don't care about you. They care about power, and they care about control. Let's go a little deeper into Mr. Murphy. Matt Corey says Senator Chris Murphy is complicit in the secrecy over congressional sex harassment payouts. Huh. Why would that be? Republican U.S. Senate candidate Matt Corey is ramping up his criticism of rival Chris Murphy, alleging the Democrat senator has refused to push for disclosure of secret settlements paid to settle sexual harassment and abuse cases on Capitol Hill. It's been a week since I demanded that Chris Murphy address this shocking and unacceptable situation, Corey said in a press release, and yet instead of calling for the full and complete disclosure of all U.S. senators and congressmen who were involved in this shocking scandal, he's silent, and his silence means he is supportive of and complicit with the cover-up. So we've covered everything so far, from a young gentleman telling you that BLM is fake, the crime statistics that BLM cites that black men are being shot, systematically all over the United States by cops is untrue, that there's systemic racism in the United States, that's untrue. We've seen that the Black Lives Matter founder, who's still the original founder within the movement, says that they are trained Marxists. We know they're being funded. We know Obama's been running a shadow government. We know that Obama was complicit with spying on General Flynn to be able to try to pin Trump for a Russian collusion hoax to get him out of the White House so that they could blackmail Pence or use Pence or get rid of Pence. It doesn't matter what they would go after Pence next. It doesn't matter. These people are just plain evil. So now they're into the final scene, the very final scene. We're in 2020. The election is 132 days away. 132 days, folks. And they've done everything. Impeachment, pandemic, riots. They only have a couple of options left. They either beat him in the election, and they're going to do it by voter fraud, or they are going to try to assassinate him. I was reading an article yesterday. I do not remember where I found it. I just happened upon it, and I did not save it. And normally I save everything, and I send it to myself. I ended up turning my phone off. I came back to it, and it was gone off the page when it refreshed. But they talked about how many times there was assassination attempt on Trump between the time he won the election and the date of his inauguration. There was over 25 documented times by the Secret Service that somebody tried to assassinate him between November and January. That is unbelievable. So who's to say that they don't try to do something, right? So I want to go a little bit deeper, and I want to tie this all together with two last points. There's a man who 10 years ago, and this guy is a scientific predictor. So his name is Peter Turchin, and he predicted in 2010 that 2020 would be mayhem, including widespread civil unrest. He's made other predictions, and he's always been right. But what he is a scientific predictor, and he looks at data, and he compiles data, and he took all the data from the last 3 centuries on cultural change within the United States, and when there was cultural rift and division, and he predicted that in 2020 there would be racial division, there would be political division, there would be civil unrest, civil discord, and he is believing that this in 2020 could actually lead to a civil war in our country. which brings me back to my point 2 points ago. If you don't own a gun, any gun, you need to get a carry conceal permit, you need to train, you need to learn how to use it, and you need to defend yourself. You need to defend your family, your rights, your liberty, and your freedom, because there will be nobody left to defend it for you. It's like that old saying, when they came for, the communists, none of us spoke out. When they came for the next group, nobody spoke out. And then they came for me, and there was nobody left to speak up for me. Well, that's what it's going to be like if we have full-blown anarchy in our streets. And this is where we're headed. Police being defunded, Marxists running rampant. They tried to take over the White House, so to speak, with their one protest. Thank God they never got in, but I mean, that's the ultimate goal, is they want to upset the government. They want Trump out by any means possible. They want him out. So before I close, I wanted to go to one more item that kind of sums up my thoughts, and I've said this in the past and I'll say it again. Ask not what your country can do for you, but ask what you can do for your country. That was John F. Kennedy, January 20th, 1961, at his inaugural speech. Trump didn't say those words at his inauguration, but he did say that he was going to create jobs and that he was going to uplift America, and he was going to give America something to strive for, that America shouldn't be the bread, we shouldn't be spending money and giving money away for people not working, and we shouldn't be supporting other countries, that every American should be self-supporting if you're able-bodied. And you kind of look at what this man said. He may have said it more eloquently, right? But Trump has an eloquent side to him, probably, and I've seen some videos and read articles where people say when he's in private, he's a very charming man, he's a very charming individual, and he give you the shirt off of his back. But Trump is a businessman from Queens, and his rough and tumble persona, he probably garnered that through 40 years or 50 years of dealing with mobsters and fraudsters and crooked politicians in the city of New York trying to build buildings. Can you imagine trying to build a building and you're dealing with a mob? You're dealing with crooked politicians who are tied to the mob. You're dealing with crooked cops. You're dealing with crooked everything, right? So you would probably build up that persona of bravado and toughness. You have to create a tough shield of armor, of Teflon, to let the crap bounce off of you, which is what he's doing in politics. Nothing sticks, and he'll keep coming back at you. You slap him, he punches you in the face. Not physically, metaphorically. And some people don't like that about him. But you have to put all that aside in 2020. All of that has to be put aside. You need to look at Trump as a policymaker and a deal maker, not as whether or not I like him. This is not an election about how great the guy looks. It's not an election about how well he portrays suaveness or how cultured he is. This is an election that's going to define who we are as a country for the next 50 years. Because if Joe Biden gets in, what you're seeing on the streets of Minneapolis and Seattle and LA and New York, that's coming to your town, because it's going to follow Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a puppet. The guy has dementia. He never wants to leave his basement. I highly doubt he's going to want to debate Trump, because he'll lose every debate. He can't even remember who he is, what state he's in. He can't remember where he is on a teleprompter. He can't remember where he is in a script. He doesn't know what job he's out for. I mean, the guy is just, I feel bad for him. And in another way, I don't feel bad for him, because he's a crook. He's a political hack. He's been on the take and screwed American citizens for 46 years. Enough is enough. So whether you like Trump for his personality, that's great. I'm all for that. Or whether you just like him for his policy. You can't make this an election about how great someone looks or how well they speak. This is about policy making decisions and what's right and what's wrong. This will be the defining election of our time. And I kept saying 2016 was going to be it. It was it. But now that you see everything that's gone on for the last almost 4 years, this is the defining moment in our history, because everything we've endured for almost 4 years with all the negative news media, all the scandals, all the crookedness, the fraud, if Biden gets in, that's going to become the norm. And you hear them talking from the pandemic, oh, we're going to go into the new normal. Is this going to be the new normal? Everybody wears masks and everybody gets the shit kicked out of them because you don't agree with their ideology? Are the brown shirts coming for us next? Are they going to try to remove our guns? I'm telling you, it won't happen. But Trump is almost a carbon copy of Kennedy. All of his policies fall in line with Kennedy. And General Flynn was the most hated man in the Obama administration because he wanted to find out what the CIA had been up to. He wanted to do a forensic monetary audit on the CIA to find out where all the money went and all the black ops they had been involved with. And Kennedy, after the Bay of Pigs, said he wanted to smash the CIA into 1,000 pieces and scatter it to the wind. And believe it or not, the president before Kennedy, he comes out and says, beware of the military industrial complex. And he even says, the government's been infected by communists and socialists. So folks, at the end of the day, I'm not telling you who you have to vote for. I'm telling you to think long and hard before you make any decisions this fall. If you're somebody who's in the left, but you're center left, you have some hard choices. Because if you like your liberty, and you like your freedom, and you like your country, and you want to see your children and your grandchildren grow up in a country where they're free, then you need to vote red up and down the ticket, and no Democrats get voted. Guys like Chris Murphy, out. We need everybody to sign up for Convention of States and get onto our state representatives and pass legislation. They get 2 terms and they're gone. We need to end the corruption in government. We need to take back our countries for ourselves. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. It's our government. It's what we say. And the silent majority is now a growing bigger majority every day. It doesn't matter whether you've got these brown shirt thugs. At the end of the day, there's way more of us than there are of them. And we can't let them and their cronies in politics defeat us. We can't lose our country. And they will try. They're going to try by voter fraud. And I think they're going to try to assassinate him. I don't think they're going to succeed because he's protected by the Secret Service and by the military. But they're going to try. They're going to try, and then they're going to say it's a crazy right-wing person who tried to kill him. You watch, mark my words. These people are evil. I've already told you some things on this show that I prophesized would come true, and they already have. Mark my words. They do not like Trump any more than they like John F. Kennedy. So with that being said, folks, if you like my show, hit the like button. If you like it even more, subscribe, and stay safe out there. Go buy yourself a gun, get trained, sign up for the Convention of States. Okay? And I'll see you on the next show. Have a great week, everybody.